Completing perioperative documentation. So when your patient is checked in and they arrive in theatre, we need to complete their intraoperative documentation. So from the perioperative tracking screen, if you double click on your patient's name, we might get some warnings about some drug doses, but it will open up your patient's perioperative documentation. So currently it will open up to case times, and we can start entering our case times in here, which will come a bit later on. Before we do that, however, I just want to close my patient's record, and it will ask me, do I want to finalize the document? And I'm going to say no, because I haven't started it yet. I want to show you the difference if the patient hasn't been checked in yet and you open up their EPR record directly. So let's have a look at this way. So I'm in my patient's record. From the menu on the left, if I then click on perioperative documentation down here, because this patient hasn't been checked in yet, it takes me to the check-in screen. So I just have to confirm the time and details and click OK for my patient to be checked in. Before we begin, I just want to show you the two different types of perioperative documentation. We've got intra-op with all of the segments down here, and then we've got the recovery document too. So it's asking me here, do I want to finalize the intra-op doc? I'm going to say no. And then it'll open up the recovery document, and I can see the recovery staff and the recovery time segments within here. But for this video, I'm going to go back to the intra-op document, and then we'll go through how to document your patient's theatre case.
On the left-hand side here, you'll see all the different items that have to be recorded. These are called segments. And segments are a collection of forms that are used to document the patient and procedure information. And it's recommended to complete all the segments in the intraoperative document, but there are segments that are mandatory. A segment with a red exclamation mark is mandatory, and segments can be added to, which will be covered later. Select case times. Within each segment there are the required fields, and required fields with a segment are indicated by a little grey box. So those little grey boxes up there means that field has got to be completed. So the patient has entered the theatre. We can click in the time box here, and the time and date will populate those fields. If it were done retrospectively, you could of course change the time as required. And once the procedure starts, again, click in the little box underneath the procedure start time, and the time and date will go into that field. We can't fill in the rest of the form because the patient is just started to be operated on and we haven't yet completed it. So we're going to return to this form later on. You need to make sure when you're filling in these segments, these forms, that we use the next button, because some segments are more than one page. You will see it indicated down here. This one only has one. So when I click on the next button, I'm expecting it to go down to the next segment, not the next page. Recording case staff. You can see that the consultant surgeon, their name is already in this box here. It's called a list box, and that's come in from the information given when the theatre operation was booked, as has the procedure has also been populated. So now I need to put in all of the staff members who are present in the theatre. And if I then select the little magnifying glass, I can select the correct person and say OK. Then I need to see what role they performed. They're circulating, so they're the runner. And I say the time in, again by clicking in that box. As you see here, there's that little a grey symbol there, which indicates that this is mandatory. We do have to fill in the time in and indeed the time out when we come to the end of the case. So I'm going to continue adding the people. Here's the little add button down here to the left here. Click add, put in the next staff member's name. And because I put in their initial this time and they were the only one, it's picked up the right person. I didn't have to use the magnifying glass. Role performed, I'm going to put this person down as the scrub person and the time in by clicking in the box. Now I would continue adding all of the people. When I get to the last person, I go to the word next, and it says, do I want to add the entry to the list box? I say yes, and they have been added, but it's also popped on to the next segment. But if I go back to the case staff, you'll see that the 3 people there are listed. As I say, you do have to have the circulator and the runner in order for this to be completed, but really we need all of the people in the theatre. General case data. As you can see, the theatre information and the case speciality have pulled through and the case level, and the only thing you have to record on this page is the ASA class. So use the drop-down menu, select the ASA class, and then say next. Because this is a short segment, only 1 page long, this will take us to the next segment. The skin assessment and skin prep segments. Select the skin assessment segment. This is 1 page long, and so we then have to fill in the fields. This one is the only one that's mandatory on this page. So skin assessment was done, and we just say how the skin was, whether we notified the surgeon, was there any skin abnormality. So whereas an abnormality, its location, we could type that in. The abnormality type, we could fill that in if required, and any more comments we could again write in. And then when we click the next button, that's moved us on to the patient positioning segment, which we had done previously, but now we're going to move on to the skin prep segment by clicking on the skin prep. Again, just 1 page long, and was hair removed by a clipper? We complete the details, who the hair was removed by, so presumably the circulating nurse, the hair removal, so the site of the operation, skin prep set solution used, and again you're going to perhaps use chlorhexidine, and again move it across. So use these little arrows to move it across to this field, because you can have multiple skin prep solutions used. If there were any other skin prep solution that was not mentioned in the above drop-down menu, you can put the other skin preparation in there. And the pre-op site can be entered in there. And then we go to the next. And what will happen is we add the entry to the inbox. And there you can see that the skin prep section, the segment has been completed because it has a green tick by it. The patient positioning segment. The procedure will pull in from a previous page. Ensure that you put a tick next to the procedure that you're positioning for, because there may be more than one procedure. And select, using the downward facing arrows, select the arm positions, the leg positions, etc. The positioning devices, if there are any. So for example, a pillow, and you will use these arrows to move them across there. Multiple positioning devices can be recorded if used. And then we have to say who it's been positioned by. Again, there's a drop-down arrow. The people attending the case that you recorded earlier will be listed. and you will select the person that did the positioning and again move them across using those arrows. If you decide that it wasn't that person, you can then move them back. So you can make sure the correct person is selected. Pressure points. Again, you could say legs and heels are free of pressure and put them there. Again, you can select more than one. Because this segment is longer, you can see down here there are 2 pages on the left-hand side, 2 pages. So in order to get to the next page, I go to the word next. The next page is quite short, and I can say the pressure points were checked by someone else, and the positioning time. If I click in the time box, that will say today and now. I can adjust it as required. Because I have now reached the second page and there are no more, when I click the next button, it will ask me, do I want to add the entry to the list box? And I do. And so what you're now seeing is that the patient positioning has a green tick beside it, meaning that we've completed that segment. We're going to record the counts, which are still recorded on a whiteboard in the operating theatre, but do also have to be recorded in EPR. So click on the counts segment, and that will take us to the counts page. On this PC, there is only one page, but please note that it could be multiple pages depending on the resolution of your screens. First of all, we need to record the procedure by clicking in the little box. So hopefully that's the right procedure. And there is only one procedure. There could be multiple procedures, in which case you select the one you're counting for. And then we have to say the type of count, whether it's the cavity count or perhaps the first closure count. And then we want to know, are the counts correct? Yes. And are any swabs, any previously retained swabs accounted for? Perhaps we could say not applicable. We need to record who the scrub practitioner was, so we use the drop-down box, and this pulls up the people that have been previously entered in the case staff. So we pick up the person who was the scrub practitioner and also the circulatory person. If there were any changeovers, we'd also select them. We could also add people if we needed to at this point. However, what we're going to do now is click the word next. And it says, do I want to add entry to the list box? That's this thing up here. I say yes. And there we go. We can see here's the count has gone in. And we've moved on to the next segment. The surgical safety pause. The surgical safety pause, which has an exclamation mark by it, meaning it is mandatory. So the safety pause, so has the second check been performed? Yes. And the date and time by clicking in the box. Both those items were mandatory because there's a little grey box above the fields. And in order to complete the surgical safety pause, I'm going to click on the word next. I can see that there's a little 1 at the bottom of the page, which means there's only one page for this segment. And when I click on the word next, it will take me to the next segment. The delay segment. In the segments, you will notice that there's a delays segment. It has an exclamation mark by it, meaning it is mandatory. When I click on delays, you can see that it defaults to no delay. So you don't need to change this unless there was a delay, and in which case you would record what sort of delay it was by using the drop-down menu and selecting as appropriate, recording the delay time from and to, and any comments you might have. So the duration will be however many minutes it is that it was delayed for. And once you've recorded the delay or the no delay, you click on the next button, and that will add the entry to inbox, list box, and I'm going to say yes. And it's just gone back in to say that these procedure start times were all correct. Click on the closure and dressing segment. So notice that the procedure is already indicated and checked, and now we've got to put in the type of skin closures and any dressings that we put on, and if there were any packing. We would then go to the word next, because we can see that there are 2 pages to this particular segment. The dressing item details, if there was a cast, if there was a splint, any tape, and the site, and anything miscellaneous. And then when we click on next, it will ask us if we want to add the entry to list box, this thing up here. We say yes, and the final closure and dressing is finished. The Who Sign Out segment. At the end of the case, we're going to record the Who Sign Out. In the segments, we'll see the words Who Sign Out. So I'm going to click on that segment, and here are the items that need to be selected, and they can be selected either by using a checkbox or a radio button. So names of the procedures recorded, is the counts correct, whether any specimens, no, any equipment problems, no, VTE prophylaxis, any concerns, no, the ball cannula has been flushed, throat swabs been removed, maybe there weren't any, applicable. And then don't forget to go to the next page, because as I can see down here, there are two pages to this segment at this resolution. So I'm going to click on next, and here's the final bit. Was there an implant? No. And the Who Sign Out time. If I click in this box, it will record the time and date, and I can adjust it as I need to if it was done retrospectively. When I click the next button, you'll see that the Who Sign Out no longer has an exclamation mark by it, but it has a green tick. That section is now complete. The skin assessment at the end of the case. You'll see the segments listed. Anything with a tick beside it has been completed. And we are now going to do the skin assessment at the end of the case. Select that, and here we are. Was the skin assessment done post-procedure? Yes. Was the skin intact? Yeah. No skin abnormality. Notified the surgeon. No abnormalities. Nothing further to record. Only 1 page to this segment, so when we go to the next, we'll move to the next segment. Adding and removing segments from the perioperative documentation. In order to be able to add a segment, you need to right-click on any segment, and you'll see the word Add Segment. You could also do that same process by clicking on the little folder that we find up there. It's the same symbol. Each specialty has a default set of segments, but perhaps, for example, we're going to use diathermy in this patient's operation. We click on diathermy, and we need to move it over to the other side, the little arrow to make it go into the selected box, and say OK. And there we can see that diathermy has been added. In the same way, we can remove segments from the perioperative documentation. So within the documenting segments, right-click on the segment that's not required, and then select Discontinue Segment Name. Discontinue diathermy. And you'll see that it's now been greyed out. Some segments can't be removed, and those are marked with the exclamation mark. Those are mandatory segments. Record the time the patient left the theatre and finalise the record. The final ones we want to do is the case times. So when I click on case times, I can now see the time the patient, the procedure was completed. I need to put in the theatre outcome by clicking the downward facing arrow and saying, for example, the surgery was completed. And again, when the time the patient leaves the theatre, I'm going to click in the little box underneath the time patient left theatre, which will auto-populate it. This page has only got one page, and when I go to next, it should go on to another segment and sign off the case times. I'm going to go in and now make sure the case staff are signed out. So the time out has been recorded. We need to make sure there's a final closure count. So I'm going to say that the swabs were correct and the instruments were correct, the charts were correct, counts were correct. Any previously retained swabs? No. Scrub practitioner was Ted. And this is the circulator. And then I'm going to go next because there is a second page. So click on next. And were there anything missing and what actions were taken? If nothing occurred there, I can click on the word add and go to the word next.
So when everything is completed, what I should be able to do now is finalise this intra-op document. So at the top here, there's a green flag, which I hover over, it says finalise. I will click that. It will let me know if the document has any deficits. So if I've missed anything out while completing the segments, it will tell me where I need to go and complete. But for this particular case, there is no deficits. So would I like to finalise the document? Yes. What that does is it creates my document. It is now on my patient record. There is a red flag up here if I wanted to unfinalise it and modify anything. But if I go to my menu and now have a look into my patient's clinical documentation, I can now see, I'll refresh just in case, but I can now see there's my Southwing intra-op document that has been completed.